She thought she was just grabbing a random stranger in a dimly lit hallway to hide from her violently toxic ex. A desperate, impulsive kiss to blend into the shadows. But when she pulled away, the man wasn't a guest. She had just kissed the city's most dangerous mafia boss. The grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel in Chicago was suffocatingly loud, an ocean of clinking champagne flutes and forced corporate laughter. Chloe Thompson stood near the edge of the room, her fingers tightly gripped around a crystal glass. She was 28, a brilliant senior accountant at a top-tier logistics firm. But tonight, she felt like a terrified teenager. Chloe smoothed her hands down the front of her emerald green velvet dress. It was a beautiful gown, custom-tailored to fit her plus-size figure. For the first time in years, she had looked in the mirror and felt genuinely glamorous, proud of her soft, full curves and the way the fabric hugged her waist and hips. But that fragile confidence shattered the second she saw him across the room. Derek Gallagher. He was her ex-fiancé, a man who had spent 3 years systematically dismantling her self-esteem. Derek was a mid-level investment banker with a silver tongue and a cruel streak that he saved exclusively for her. He had monitored her meals, mocked her weight under the guise of caring about her health, and constantly reminded her that a woman of her size was lucky to have a man like him. Leaving him had been the hardest, most dangerous thing she had ever done, especially after the explosive, glass-shattering rage he displayed on their final night together. And now, he was here. He was supposed to be in New York, but there he was, standing by the ice sculpture, his cold blue eyes scanning the crowd. Then they locked onto her. A sickening smirk twisted his lips. He immediately pushed away from the bar, charting a direct course toward her. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in Chloe's chest. Her breath hitched. She couldn't do this. She couldn't let him corner her in public. Couldn't endure his whispered threats or the humiliating way he would grab her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh hard enough to leave bruises while smiling for the cameras. Chloe turned on her heel and practically fled. She shoved past a group of laughing executives, ignoring their indignant protests, her heels sinking into the thick carpet as she hurried toward the exit. She slipped through a set of heavy mahogany doors, leaving the blaring jazz band behind, and found herself in a dimly lit, secluded corridor leading toward the private VIP suites. Footsteps echoed behind her, heavy, deliberate, and moving fast. "Chloe," Derek's voice echoed down the hall, dripping with that familiar, mocking condescension. "Don't be pathetic. Stop walking." She looked frantically around. The corridor was empty. There were no side doors, no restrooms, nowhere to hide. Except for a deep, shadowed alcove halfway down the hall, where a tall figure stood with his back to her, seemingly examining a painting on the wall. Derek was rounding the corner. She had seconds. Driven by sheer, blind terror, Chloe lunged into the alcove. She grabbed the stranger by the lapels of his flawlessly tailored suit, spun him around, and pressed her lips desperately against his. She expected a shout of outrage. She expected him to shove her away in disgust. Instead, a pair of large, incredibly strong hands grasped her waist. They didn't push her. They pulled her flush against a rock-hard chest. The kiss, meant to be a mere shield, instantly ignited into something terrifyingly real. The stranger's mouth was warm, tasting of expensive whiskey and mint. Before Chloe could process what was happening, he took total control of the kiss. His tongue brushed against her bottom lip, demanding entry, and a jolt of pure, unadulterated heat shot straight to her core. He held her with a possessive, unyielding grip, his large hands spreading wide across the plush velvet, covering her lower back, holding her heavy curves as if they were exactly what he had been waiting for. Footsteps rushed past the alcove. Derek. He muttered a curse, completely oblivious to the two people entwined in the shadows, and continued down the hall. Chloe pulled back, gasping for air, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. Her cheeks were burning, her lipstick smeared. I am so sorry, she stammered, keeping her eyes cast down at his chest, noting the expensive silk tie and the solid gold tie clip. There was a man, my ex. He was following me, and I panicked. I didn't know what else to do. When the stranger didn't answer, she slowly dragged her gaze upward. The man looking down at her possessed a face that looked like it had been carved from marble by an artist who specialized in lethal beauty. He had sharp, aristocratic cheekbones, a strong jaw lightly dusted with dark stubble, and eyes so dark they were practically pitch black. He was undeniably gorgeous, but there was an aura of quiet, terrifying violence vibrating off him. He didn't look angry. He looked amused and incredibly predatory. Is that so? His voice was a deep, raspy baritone that sent a shiver down Chloe's spine. Before Chloe could apologize again, a sound made her freeze. The synchronized click of a dozen gun safeties being switched off. Chloe turned her head, the blood draining from her face. Stepping out from the shadows of the adjoining VIP suite were 6 massive men in black suits. Their expressions were utterly stone-faced, and every single one of them had a silenced pistol pointed directly at her head. "Boss," one of the men, a heavily scarred Italian man, spoke up, his voice deadpan. "Do you want me to dispose of her?" Chloe stopped breathing. She looked back at the man she had just kissed. "Boss, Vincent Moretti." She recognized him from a hushed, terrified conversation she had overheard between 2 of her firm's senior partners. Vincent Moretti was the heir to the Moretti crime syndicate, the most ruthless, untouchable mafia organization in the Midwest. He owned politicians, judges, and half the city's real estate. People who crossed him didn't just disappear, they were erased. And she had just grabbed him by the lapels and used him as a human shield. Vincent raised a single, gloved hand. Instantly, the guns were lowered, vanishing back into shoulder holsters with practiced military precision. He looked back down at Chloe, his dark eyes slowly dropping to take in her full figure, lingering on the plunge of her velvet neckline and the flare of her hips before rising back to her terrified face. Unlike Derek, whose gaze always made her feel bloated and grotesque, Vincent's stare was heavy, hungry, and full of raw appreciation. "Stand down, Matteo," Vincent said softly, his eyes never leaving Chloe. "The lady was just hiding." I have to go," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling so violently she could barely form the words. She ripped herself away from his grip. Vincent let her go, his hands falling gracefully to his sides. Chloe hitched up the skirt of her heavy dress and ran blindly back toward the safety of the crowded ballroom, her pulse roaring in her ears. She didn't look back. If she had, she would have seen Vincent Moretti touching his own lip, a dark, dangerous smile slowly spreading across his face as he watched her disappear. 3 days had passed since the gala. 72 hours of Chloe jumping at every shadow, locking her apartment doors twice, and avoiding staring at any black SUVs that drove past her office window. She tried to convince herself she was being paranoid. Vincent Moretti was a billionaire crime lord. He dealt in multi-million-dollar racketeering and international shipping. He wasn't going to waste his time tracking down a plus-size accountant who had accidentally kissed him in a hallway. To a man like him, she was a fleeting, bizarre 5 seconds of his life. Nothing more. But her relief at surviving the Mafia encounter was completely overshadowed by the nightmare of Derek. Derek had figured out she was at the gala. Since that night, he had called her phone 42 times, leaving voicemails that alternated between sobbing apologies and vicious, degrading threats. He had emailed her corporate account. He had even sent a dozen wilted black roses to her desk with a note that read, "You can't hide your fat ass from me forever." Chloe was exhausted. She felt hunted, worn down to a nub by the constant anxiety. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when she finally left the office, her briefcase heavy in her hand. The streets of downtown Chicago were slick and reflecting the neon lights of the city. She pulled her trench coat tighter around her body, the chill cutting through the fabric. She just wanted to get to her modest apartment in Lincoln Park, order takeout, and cry in the shower. She unlocked the front door of her apartment building and stepped into the dimly lit lobby. "Hello, Piggy." Chloe froze. The blood turned to ice in her veins. Derek was sitting on the lobby sofa, legs crossed, swirling a paper coffee cup in his hand. He looked disheveled, his eyes manic and bloodshot. He stood up, blocking her path to the elevators. "How did you get in here?" Chloe demanded, forcing her voice to stay steady, even though her knees were shaking. "Derek, you need to leave. I will call the police." "The police?" Derek scoffed, taking a step toward her. "For what?" "Trying to talk to my fiancé." "Ex-fiancé," Chloe snapped, backing up toward the glass doors. "We're done, Derek. It's been 6 months. Leave me alone." "We're done when I say we're done," Derek suddenly shouted, his facade of calm shattering. He lunged forward, grabbing her roughly by the upper arm. His fingers dug painfully into her flesh, exactly the way she had feared at the gala. "Let go of me," Chloe cried out, struggling against his grip. But Derek was taller and significantly stronger. He yanked her toward him, his face inches from hers, his breath smelling heavily of stale beer. "You think you can do better than me, Chloe?" he hissed, his eyes raking over her body with pure disgust. "Look at you. You're huge. No one is ever going to want a fat, pathetic cow like you. I'm the only one who could ever stomach looking at you without your clothes on. You belong to me." Tears of humiliation and pain sprang to Chloe's eyes. It was the same venom, the same poison he had injected into her for years. And God help her, a small, broken part of her brain still believed him. "Let her go." The voice was quiet. It wasn't a shout or a demand. It was a statement of absolute, irrefutable fact. It echoed through the empty lobby, chilling the air by 10 degrees. Derek stopped, confused, still keeping his painful grip on Chloe's arm. He turned his head toward the shadows near the mailboxes. 3 men stepped into the dim light of the lobby. 2 of them were absolute mountains of muscle, dressed in impeccably tailored dark suits. But it was the man standing between them that made Chloe's breath physically stop in her throat. Vincent Moretti. He was wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit, an unlit cigarette resting between his fingers. He looked bored, but his dark, pitch-black eyes were fixed on Derek's hand where it was bruising Chloe's arm, and in those eyes was a promise of unimaginable violence. "Who the hell are you?" Derek spat, trying to puff out his chest, though his voice wavered slightly. "This is a private conversation. Back off." Vincent didn't even look at Derek's face. He snapped his fingers, a crisp, sharp sound. In a blur of motion too fast to track, the scarred man from the hotel hallway, Matteo, crossed the lobby. He grabbed Derek's wrist, the one holding Chloe, and twisted. A sickening crack echoed off the marble walls. Derek let out a high-pitched, agonizing scream, falling to his knees as his wrist shattered. He released Chloe instantly, clutching his ruined arm to his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. Chloe stumbled backward, gasping, her back hitting the cold wall of the lobby. She stared in absolute horror at Derek writhing on the floor, and then up at the men who had just casually broken his bones. Vincent walked slowly across the lobby, the sharp click of his Italian leather shoes acting as a metronome against Derek's whimpers. He stepped completely over Derek, as if the crying man was nothing more than a stain on the rug, and stopped directly in front of Chloe. Up close, he smelled exactly as she remembered. Bergamot, expensive whiskey, and danger. Vincent reached out. Chloe flinched, squeezing her eyes shut, expecting a blow. Instead, she felt the agonizingly gentle brush of his knuckles against the tears on her cheek. "Open your eyes, Mia Bella," Vincent murmured. Chloe slowly opened them. He was staring down at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "He called you fat," Vincent said quietly, his gaze slowly dropping to take in the curves hidden beneath her trench coat. "He said no one would want you." Chloe swallowed hard, shame burning through her fear. She looked away. "Please, just let me go upstairs. Don't hurt me." Vincent stepped closer, invading her personal space, his chest brushing against hers. He reached up, his large, warm hand cupping her jaw, forcing her to look back up into his dark eyes. "Hurt you?" Vincent repeated, a dark, low chuckle vibrating in his chest. "You used a mafia boss to escape a rat, Chloe Thompson. You tasted like fear and champagne, and you ran from me. I don't want to hurt you." His thumb stroked across her lower lip, right where she had kissed him 3 nights ago. "I've spent 3 days tearing this city apart, looking for the woman who dared to steal from me," Vincent whispered, his voice dropping to a gravelly, possessive purr. "And now that I've found you, I'm going to show you exactly how much a man can want every single inch of you." Behind them, Derek moaned in pain. Vincent didn't even look back. "Matteo," Vincent ordered, his eyes never leaving Chloe's terrified, mesmerized face. "Take the trash outside, and if he ever comes within 10 miles of my woman again, take his other hand." The transition from the dingy, rain-soaked lobby of her apartment building to the sprawling, multi-million-dollar penthouse on Lakeshore Drive felt like a fever dream. Chloe hadn't packed a bag. She hadn't even locked her front door. Vincent Moretti had simply wrapped his heavy cashmere overcoat around her trembling, rain-chilled shoulders and ushered her into the back of a bulletproof Maybach. Now sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a bedroom larger than Chloe's entire apartment. She sat on the edge of a massive, silk-sheeted bed, staring blankly at the tray of fresh pastries and black coffee a silent maid had left on the nightstand. "You haven't eaten." Chloe jumped. Vincent was leaning against the mahogany door frame. He had discarded the suit jacket and tie from the night before, wearing only a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and completely covered in dark, intricate ink. The tattoos clashed violently with the billionaire aesthetic, a stark reminder of the blood and brutality that built his empire. "I'm not hungry," Chloe lied softly, wrapping her arms around her stomach, a defensive habit Derek had ingrained in her. "Mr. Moretti, I can't stay here. I have a job. I have a life." Vincent pushed off the doorframe and walked toward her. With every step, the sheer dominance radiating from him seemed to suck the oxygen from the room. He didn't stop until he was standing between her parted knees. He reached down, catching her wrists and gently pulling her arms away from her stomach. "You are hiding again," Vincent murmured, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "I told you last night, Mia Bella. No one is ever going to make you feel like you have to shrink yourself again, especially not in my house." Derek said, "Derek is a dead man walking if he ever breathes your name again." Vincent cut her off, his voice lethal and cold. He knelt in front of her, entirely unfazed by the ruin of his expensive slacks on the hardwood floor. His large hands settled warmly on her plush, heavy thighs. "Listen to me, Chloe. Men like that, small, weak men, they try to break down women who carry real power. Your body is magnificent. It is lush and soft and perfect. You are a goddess meant to be worshipped, not a secret to be starved." Chloe's breath hitched. A tear slipped down her cheek, completely unbidden. For 3 years, she had been told her weight was a burden, a disgusting flaw she needed to apologize for. Now, the most dangerous, powerful man in Chicago was on his knees, looking at her thick thighs and round hips as if they were the Holy Grail. Vincent leaned forward and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to the swell of her stomach through the silk of her borrowed nightgown. The gesture was so tender, so completely at odds with the violent mafia kingpin he was, that a sob tore from Chloe's throat. "I bought you clothes," Vincent said, standing up and pulling her to her feet with effortless strength. He guided her to the massive walk-in closet. Chloe gasped. The space was filled with dozens of custom-tailored designer garments. There were rich emerald wrap dresses from Oscar de la Renta, flowing silk blouses, and wide-fit, red-soled Christian Louboutin heels that wouldn't pinch her feet. He hadn't just bought her clothes. He had brought in a team to ensure everything was explicitly designed to flatter her plus-size figure. Sitting on the center island was a velvet box containing a blindingly brilliant Cartier diamond necklace. "Vincent, this is too much. I can't accept this. I'm just an accountant." "You are mine," Vincent corrected smoothly, sliding his arms around her waist from behind and pulling her back against his solid chest. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling her scent. "And the woman who stands beside the head of the Moretti family wears whatever she pleases. Get dressed. Tonight we are going to Alinea. I want the whole city to see you." But what Vincent didn't tell her, what he was actively hiding behind the lavish gifts and the intoxicating, obsessive affection, was the storm brewing in the underworld. Downstairs, in the heavily guarded basement office of the penthouse, Matteo stood over a metal table. "The Russo syndicate is making moves, boss," Matteo reported when Vincent finally came downstairs. "They found out about the girl. They know you brought her here." Vincent poured a glass of scotch, his expression hardening into a mask of pure, sociopathic calm. "How?" "Her ex," Matteo grunted, tossing a manila folder onto the desk. "Derek Gallagher. Turns out the banker has a gambling problem. He owes the Russos $500,000. When we broke his wrist and humiliated him in that lobby, he went straight to Tommy Russo. He sold them Chloe's identity. He told them she's your new weakness." The crystal glass in Vincent's hand shattered. Whiskey and blood dripped onto the Persian rug. "Weakness," Vincent repeated, a terrifying, humorless smile stretching across his face. "Tommy Russo thinks my woman is a weakness." He pulled a monogrammed handkerchief from his pocket and wrapped his bleeding hand. "Double the perimeter guard. And Matteo, tell the boys to load the hollow points tonight. The Russos are going to try something at the restaurant. I want them to." The private dining room at Alinea was a masterclass in modern luxury, but Chloe could barely focus on the elaborate 20-course tasting menu. She was too hyper-aware of the man sitting across from her. Vincent looked devastating in a midnight blue tuxedo, He hadn't stopped touching her all night, a hand on her knee under the table, his fingers tracing the bare skin of her shoulder, his dark eyes constantly dropping to the deep cleavage accentuated by the custom red velvet gown he had chosen for her. He made her feel powerful. He made her feel sexy. "You're quiet," Vincent noted, taking a sip of his wine. "I'm just overwhelmed," Chloe admitted, her fingers toying with the stem of her glass. 3 days ago, I was terrified of my own shadow. Now I'm wearing a dress that costs more than my car, having dinner with a man who owns half the city. She looked up, her gaze steady. "Are you going to keep me locked up, Vincent? Am I just a pet?" Vincent set his glass down. The playful, seductive edge vanished from his eyes, replaced by a searing intensity. "You are not a pet, Chloe. You are the only thing in my life that breathes life into me. If you want to leave right now, I will put you in a car, give you $10 million, and you will never see me again. But if you stay as my equal, my Donna." Before Chloe could process the massive weight of that promise, the heavy mahogany doors of the private dining room blew open. Chaos erupted. 3 men in dark leather jackets burst into the room, raising automatic weapons. But Vincent had been waiting. Faster than Chloe could blink, Vincent flipped the heavy oak dining table upward, throwing Chloe to the floor and shielding her body entirely with his own massive frame. Deafening gunfire shattered the tranquility of the restaurant. Crystal glasses exploded. Plaster rained down from the ceiling. Chloe screamed, pressing her hands over her ears, her face buried in Vincent's chest. He didn't flinch. He held her tight, a human fortress of muscle and bespoke tailoring. "Stay down!" Vincent roared over the noise. From the hallway, Matteo and 4 Moretti enforcers returned fire. The gunfight was brutal, precise, and over in less than 30 seconds. The 3 Russo hitters hit the floor, dead before they even knew what went wrong. The ringing silence that followed was terrifying. The smell of copper and sulfur filled the air. Vincent stood up, pulling Chloe with him. He quickly ran his hands over her body, his eyes wild with frantic panic, until he was certain she didn't have a single scratch on her. "Are you hurt? Talk to me, Chloe." I'm okay," she choked out, trembling so violently her teeth chattered. "Bring him in," Vincent barked over his shoulder. Matteo dragged a bloody, whimpering figure into the ruined dining room. It was Derek. He was bruised, missing a shoe, and crying hysterically. "Chloe! Chloe! Please!" Derek shrieked, struggling against Matteo's iron grip. "They made me do it. The Russos, they said they'd kill me if I didn't tell them where you were." Chloe stared at the pathetic, sniveling man on the floor. This was the man who had terrorized her for years. The man who had made her hate her own reflection. And right now, looking at him groveling in the shattered glass of a Michelin star restaurant, she felt absolutely nothing but disgust. Vincent pulled a sleek silver handgun from his shoulder holster. He cocked it, the metallic click echoing loudly in the room, and pressed the barrel directly to Derek's forehead. "You sold what is mine," Vincent said softly. The absolute lack of emotion in his voice was more terrifying than any shout. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't paint this floor with your brains." "Vincent, wait," Chloe said. Vincent froze. He didn't lower the gun, but he looked at her. The men in the room tensed, completely shocked that anyone would dare interrupt the boss during an execution. Chloe stepped around the overturned table, her red velvet dress sweeping through the glass. She looked down at Derek. He looked up at her with pathetic, hopeful eyes, thinking she was going to save him. "You told me I was weak," Chloe said, her voice steady and clear. "You told me I was nothing without you. But look at you, Derek. You are a coward. You sold me out to save your own miserable life." She turned to Vincent. She looked at the gun in his hand, at the blood on the floor, at the dark, violent underworld he commanded. She realized with absolute clarity that she didn't fear his darkness, because his darkness existed entirely to protect her light. Chloe reached out and gently pushed Vincent's gun arm down. "Don't kill him in here. It'll ruin my dress." Vincent's breath hitched. A slow, wicked, impossibly proud smirk spread across his aristocratic face. He looked at her as if she had just handed him the world. "Matteo," Vincent said, never taking his eyes off Chloe. "Take Mr. Gallagher to the docks. Make sure he understands the penalty for his debts." "No, Chloe, no, please!" Derek screamed as he was dragged backward out of the room, his voice fading down the hallway until a heavy door slammed shut, cutting him off completely. The dining room was quiet again. Vincent holstered his weapon and took a step toward her. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away a stray smudge of dust from her cheek. "You didn't run," Vincent whispered in awe. "I'm done running," Chloe answered, reaching up to grip his wrists. She stepped into his space, pressing her soft, full curves flush against his hard, heavily muscled body. "You promised I wouldn't have to hide anymore." Vincent let out a low groan, wrapping his arms around her waist and lifting her off the floor. He kissed her, a bruising, desperate, fiercely possessive kiss that tasted of gunpowder and absolute devotion. "Never again, Mia Bella," Vincent vowed against her lips, his hands exploring the lush weight of her hips. "You are the Donna of Chicago now. Let them try and look down on you. I'll burn the whole damn city to the ground for you." Chloe kissed him back, letting the heat of the Mafia kingpin wash away the last remnants of her past. She had accidentally kissed a stranger in a hallway, desperate to escape her own life. In return, he had given her a kingdom. Did Chloe's descent into the glamorous, dangerous underworld of the Moretti family leave you breathless? If you loved this story of a plus-size queen finding her dark, protective king, smash that like button and share this video with your fellow romance lovers. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another thrilling, steamy story from us. Drop a comment below. Would you have chosen the Mafia boss? See you in the next video.